I was 33 years old when I learned that the people I trusted most had stolen from my child. The worst part? For months, I had no idea. My name is Claire, and my daughter Emma was 10 years old at the time. She was the sweetest kid you'd ever meet, smart, kind, and somehow always smiling, even after losing her father when she was only 6. When my husband Daniel passed away in a construction accident, it shattered our world. The only thing that gave me comfort was knowing he had planned ahead. His life insurance policy and a small inheritance from his grandfather were placed into a protected trust fund for Emma. That's for her future, Daniel had told me years earlier. College, a house someday, whatever she dreams of. I promised him I'd protect it. After Daniel died, things became difficult financially. I worked long hours as a medical office administrator while raising Emma alone. During that time, my parents offered help. "We're family," my mother said. "Let us handle some of the trust paperwork. It'll make things easier." At the time, I was overwhelmed with grief and responsibilities. My father had worked in banking for years, so I believed they knew what they were doing. Big mistake. For the next few years, everything seemed normal. Emma visited her grandparents regularly. They spoiled her with gifts and constantly talked about how much they loved her. Then something strange happened. One Saturday afternoon, Emma came home from their house looking upset. "Mom," she asked quietly, "what's a trust fund?" The question caught me off guard. "Why are you asking?" She hesitated. Grandpa said, "I shouldn't worry about it because there's not much left anyway." I froze. Not much left? My stomach tightened instantly. What exactly did Grandpa say? Emma looked nervous. He was showing someone the new movie room in the basement, the really big one with the giant screen and those fancy chairs. His friend asked how he could afford it, and Grandpa laughed and said, "Kids don't need that much money sitting around." I felt my heart skip. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Emma had heard something wrong. That's what I kept telling myself. But that night, after Emma went to bed, I logged into the trust account for the first time in nearly a year, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Several large withdrawals had been made. Thousands of dollars. Money that should never have been touched. And beside one transaction was a note that changed everything. A note containing my father's signature. At that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had been taking my daughter's inheritance, and I was about to find out exactly where every dollar had gone. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face and heard my father's words. Kids don't need that much money sitting around. The next morning, I started digging through the account records. At first, I hoped there was some innocent explanation. Maybe the withdrawals had been approved for taxes or trust management fees. But the deeper I looked, the worse it got. There weren't just one or two transactions. There were dozens. Money had been disappearing for almost 18 months. My hands shook as I downloaded every statement and receipt I could find. Then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Several payments had been made to the same home entertainment company. The amount matched the estimated cost of a luxury home theater, a giant screen, premium surround sound, leather recliner seating, everything Emma had described seeing in my parents' basement. I felt sick. My daughter had lost her father, and the money meant to secure her future had been used to build a private movie room. I called my mother immediately. "Mom, I need an explanation." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Then she said, "You're overreacting." Overreacting? I was staring at proof that thousands of dollars belonging to a 10-year-old child had vanished. "Did you take Emma's money?" My mother's voice hardened. "We borrowed some of it." Borrowed. That single word nearly made me lose control. Borrowed? Without asking me? We always intended to pay it back. Besides, we're family. I hung up before I said something I would regret, but my anger quickly turned into determination. Over the next week, I gathered every record, statement, authorization form, and transaction history I could find. Then I discovered something even more disturbing. One authorization document contained a signature that looked like mine, except I had never signed it. Not only had someone taken Emma's inheritance, Someone had forged my name to do it, and the moment I realized that, I knew this was no longer just a family dispute. It was a crime. The moment I realized my signature had been forged, something inside me changed. Up until then, I had still been hoping there was a way to solve this quietly. I wanted to believe my parents had made a terrible mistake. But mistakes don't involve forged documents. Mistakes don't happen over 18 months. And mistakes certainly don't drain a child's inheritance account while building a luxury home theater. I contacted an attorney the very next day. After reviewing the records, he looked at me and said, "Claire, these transactions raised some very serious legal concerns." That was the first time someone outside the family confirmed what I already knew. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. And I wasn't imagining things. My attorney immediately requested additional records from the trust administrator and the bank. Within 2 weeks, a much clearer picture emerged. The withdrawals had been carefully disguised. Money was transferred in smaller amounts to avoid attention. Some payments were routed through accounts connected to my parents. Others went directly to contractors and suppliers involved in renovating their basement. The evidence was overwhelming. Then came the bombshell. One of the contractors provided copies of invoices and payment confirmations. The billing address on the paperwork was my parents' home. The funding source was Emma's trust account. There was no denying it anymore. Every receipt told the same story. Every record pointed to the same people, my parents. When they learned I had hired an attorney, they suddenly wanted to talk. We met at a restaurant halfway between our homes. My father arrived looking annoyed rather than worried. "We're your parents," he said. "You don't take your family to court." I stared at him in disbelief. "You stole from your granddaughter." His face darkened. "We spent money on the family." "No," I replied. "You spent Emma's money on yourselves." For the first time, he had no answer. The meeting ended with my mother crying and my father storming out. 3 days later, my attorney filed a formal civil action. Soon afterward, investigators began reviewing the forged signature and financial records. And that's when my parents finally realized something they should have understood from the beginning. This wasn't a family argument anymore. The paper trail was complete. The evidence was real, and they were out to face consequences they never saw coming. The court hearing took place almost 4 months after I first discovered the missing money. By then, the investigators had finished reviewing everything: the forged signature, the bank records, the invoices, the trust documents. The evidence was undeniable. My parents spent years insisting they had done nothing wrong. But the records told a completely different story. When the judge reviewed the case, my father's excuses fell apart one by one. "We intended to pay it back," he repeated. But the judge wasn't impressed. The intentions didn't change the fact that money belonging to a 10-year-old child had been taken without permission, and forging my signature made the situation even worse. For the first time since all this began, I saw fear on my father's face. Real fear. A few weeks later, the court ordered my parents to repay every dollar they had taken from Emma's trust fund. Not only that, but they were required to cover legal fees and additional financial penalties. To make those payments, they had to sell the very home theater they had built with Emma's money. The giant screen was removed. The luxury chairs were auctioned. The sound system was sold. Everything they had proudly shown off to their friends disappeared piece by piece. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The room they had stolen for became the reason they lost thousands more. As for Emma, I made sure she never had to sit through the ugly legal details. All she knew was that her future was safe again. One evening, several months later, we were sitting on our porch watching the sunset when she looked up at me and asked, "Dad would be proud of you, wouldn't he?" I felt tears fill my eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart," I whispered. "I think he would." That moment meant more to me than any courtroom victory. I eventually cut contact with my parents. Some people thought I was harsh. Maybe. But protecting my daughter was never negotiable. The people who were supposed to guard her future tried to steal it. Instead, they lost their reputation. their money, and the trust of the only family they had left. And Emma? She kept every dollar that belonged to her, exactly as her father intended. The end.